I want to start with a scenario that I think every single person listening has either been through, is going through right now, or is like actively dreading. You're at a dinner party, or maybe it's Thanksgiving. You're around the table with all the extended family. The food's great, wine is flowing, and then someone brings it up. The H word, housing.
It is the universal conversation starter
Yeah.
and the universal mood killer all at once.
Immediately, the vibe just shifts. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You've got your Uncle Bob on one side. He's on his third glass of red. He's pointing his fork at you, and he's saying, listen to me. If you are paying rent, you are setting money on fire. You're just throwing it away. He looks at you like you failed some basic test of adult life.
And then right across from him, you have your friend, maybe they're a bit younger, spend too much time on, financial blogs. And they are just rolling their eyes saying, actually, Bob, buying is a trap. The market's a bubble. You're tying all your capital to a dying asset class.
And you're just sitting there in the middle, trying to eat your potatoes, feeling this knot forming in your stomach, because this stuff, it keeps people up at night. It genuinely ruins relationships. I have friends who have broken up over this. It is, without a doubt, the single biggest financial decision that most of us will ever make. But it feels like so much more than that, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And the reason those dinner table arguments get so heated, the reason Uncle Bob gets, so red in the face,
Yeah.
is that we aren't just talking about money. We're talking about identity.
Yes.
We're talking about what it means to be a successful adult in our society. There is this massive, crushing emotional weight that comes with the deed to a house that you just don't get with your, say, 401k balance.
Exactly. It feels like a pass-fail test for adulthood. That's the story we've been told. If you own, you pass. You're responsible. You've made it. If you rent, you're in this state of arrested development. You're not quite a full citizen yet. But here's where it gets really interesting and why we wanted to do this deep dive today. We've got a massive stack of sources here. Financial analysis, historical data, US versus Europe comparisons. And the thesis that jumps out is pretty shocking. The answer isn't what your parents told you. It's definitely not what your real estate agent is telling you. And frankly, the truth is a lot messier than just buy good, rent bad.
That's right. The truth is really a math problem. But it's a math problem where the variables change depending on who you are, where you live, and crucially, what year it is.
So here's the plan for this deep dive. We're going to treat this like a polite debate, a collaborative one, but still a debate. I'm going to play the skeptic. I'm representing the person who, grew up believing in the American dream, the person who's scrolling Zillow at 2 a.m, feeling a panic attack coming on. I want to believe the dream, but the numbers look terrifying.
Like that.
And you're the analyst. Bring the cold, hard math. We need to move beyond the dogma and figure out what's actually right for the person listening to this.
I love that format. And just to be clear, my goal here isn't to win an argument for team rent or team buy. I don't really have a horse in that race. My goal is to give you the tools to run the numbers for your own life.
Yeah.
Because, and I can't stress this enough, there is no universal answer. Anyone who tells you always buy or always rent is probably trying to sell you something.
Okay, fair enough. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of equity and amortization, we have to set the context. Why does this conversation feel so incredibly urgent right now? Why does it feel like the stakes are so much higher in 2024 or 2025 than they were even 5 years ago? This feels different.
It feels different because the ground fundamentally shifted beneath our feet. I mean, you have to look at the post-pandemic roller coaster to really get it. If you just rewind to 2020 or 2021, we were in this historical anomaly. In the U.S., interest rates dropped below 3%.
It's basically free money.
It's essentially free money. I mean, if inflation is 2% and you're borrowing at 2.5%, the bank is practically paying you to take out a loan. At the same time, you had this huge psychological shift where everyone was stuck at home. Suddenly, that tiny apartment wasn't cutting it anymore. Everyone wanted a yard, a her office, a demand just skyrocketed.
Yeah.
It skyrocketed.
Oh, I remember that period so vividly. It was pure mania. People were bidding $50,000, $100,000 over asking price, waiving inspections, which is just... It's insane to think about. Buying a house without even knowing if the foundation is cracked.
Exactly. It was a frenzy. Prices surged, 30 to 50% in some markets in a really short window. But here's the kicker. That was just phase one. Phase two was the hangover. To fight the inflation that came from all that spending, the central banks, the Fed in the U.S., the ECB in Europe, started hiking rates, and they hiked them fast. So we went from a world of 3% mortgages to 7, even 8% mortgages in the blink of an eye.
And I know we hear those numbers, 3%, 7%, and it sounds like a small change, right? It's just single digits. But can you
It's huge. It completely changes the product. Let's take a standard hypothetical $300,000 loan. At those crazy low pandemic rates of, say, 2.5%, your monthly principal and interest payment is about $1,200.
Okay, pretty manageable.
Very manageable for a lot of households. Now, take that exact same loan, same house, same kitchen, same land amount, but price it at 7%. That payment jumps to nearly $2,000 a month.
Whoa. Hold on. So that's an $800 difference
Per month.
per month for
Right.
30 years. You are paying $800 more every single month, almost $10,000 a year, just for the privilege of borrowing the money. You don't get a better house. You aren't paying it off faster. You are just handing that cash to the bank as interest. Wow. That is why the math problem is so much harder today. You have the high sticker prices from the pandemic boom combined with the high borrowing costs of the inflation fight. It's a brutal double whammy. So if you're listening and you're beating yourself up because you can't seem to make the numbers work, or you think, I make a good salary, why can't I afford a starter home? It's not just you. The game got a lot harder.
It absolutely did. The ladder was pulled up a few rungs for sure.
All right, let's get into the meat of this. I want to play advocate for the American dream here for a minute. Let's define our terms and steel man the case for buying. So when we say buying financially, what is actually happening?
Fundamentally, buying is paying a mortgage to build equity. Yes, you're paying interest to the bank. That's the rent on the money. But you're also paying down a principal balance. You're slowly buying a slice of the asset until eventually you own 100% of it.
And renting is?
Renting, by contrast, is paying for the service of housing.
Yeah.
Money leaves your account, you get a roof over your head for 30 days, and then the transaction is over. No asset is accumulated. It's consumption, not investment.
Okay, so let's build the buy argument. If you were a real estate evangelist, if you were my Uncle Bob at the dinner table, what are the pillars of your religion? What's the strongest case for why I should hand over my life savings for a down payment?
I'd say there are 5 main pillars. And to be fair to Uncle Bob, they're pretty strong pillars. The first, and maybe the most practical one that people overlook, is what we call forced savings.
Forced savings. That sounds like a behavioral trick.
It is, and it's a really necessary one. It's based on behavioral economics. The reality is most people are just not disciplined enough to save money consistently. If you have $500 left over at the end of the month, statistically, you're probably going to spend it.
Yeah, a nice dinner, a new gadget, it just vanishes.
It vanishes. But a mortgage payment is mandatory. You have to pay it, or you lose your house. And since a portion of that payment goes to principal, you're effectively being forced to save money every month. You wake up 30 years later, and you have a paid-off asset worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, even if you never consciously tried to save a dime.
That makes a ton of sense. It protects you from your own worst impulses. It's like a piggy bank you can't crack open.
Exactly. So pillar number 2 is long-term appreciation. Real estate, in general, trends up over time. In the U.S., home prices have roughly tripled over the last 50 years. If you look at major European cities, London, Munich, Paris, the gains have been astronomical. It's a physical asset, and it acts as a hedge against inflation.
Okay, but here's where it gets really juicy. This is the one that I think makes people's eyes light up. Pillar number 3, leverage. This is the superpower of real estate, right? This is how people get rich.
It is the single biggest financial advantage of buying property, and it's almost totally unique to real estate.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no other asset class where a bank will lend you 80 or 90% of the money to buy it. You can't just walk into a bank and say, hey, I'd like to buy $300,000 of Apple stock, but I only have $60,000. Can you spot me the rest?
They would laugh you out of the building.
And they would, but for a house, they say, sure, sign here.
So walk me through the math of why that leverage is so powerful. I want to really visualize this.
Okay, think of a literal lever. You're pushing down with a small amount of force, but you're lifting a massive rock. So let's say you buy that $300,000 house. You put 20% down, which is $60,000. That's your force. The bank puts in the other $240,000.
Right.
Now, let's say the market goes up by 10%. Just a normal year. The house is now worth $330,000. That's a $30,000 gain.
Okay, so a $30,000 gain on a $300,000 house, 10%. Seems pretty standard.
Right. The house went up 10%. But you didn't invest $300,000. You only invested $60,000 of your own cash. So you made a $30,000 profit on a $60,000 investment. That is a 50% return on your cash.
Wait, run that by me again? The market only moved 10%, but my money grew by 50%.
Precisely. That is leverage. You control 100% of the gains with only 20% of the money. When the market is going up, leverage is financial magic. It amplifies your returns 5 to 1. This is why real estate has created so much wealth for the middle class.
That is actually wild when you spell it out like that. If I'd put that same 60 grand in the stock market and it went up 10%, I'd have made 6,000 bucks. In the house, I made 30,000. Okay, I'm starting to see Uncle Bob's point a little more clearly.
It's a very compelling point. And then you have pillar number 4, tax incentives.
Yeah.
The government actively wants you to buy a house. In the U.S., you have the mortgage interest deduction. In Europe, there are all sorts of government schemes to encourage ownership. The system is tilted in favor of the buyer.
And the fifth one isn't financial, but honestly, it might be the most powerful one. The emotional stability, the feeling of, this is mine.
The ability to paint the walls whatever color you want, the knowledge that the landlord can't sell the building out from under you, knowing your kids can stay in the same school district without the fear of eviction. That sense of permanence has a value that's hard to put a dollar sign on, but it is very, very real. It's psychological security.
Okay, so that's the case for buying, and honestly, standing here right now, it sounds totally bulletproof. For savings, massive leverage, tax breaks, stability, why would anyone ever rent? It sounds like renting is for suckers. So now you have to flip the script. How is it possible that renting can actually be the smarter financial move?
It feels counterintuitive, but let's look at the math that people tend to ignore. The strongest argument for renting is flexibility as an asset. We live in a modern economy where the average job tenure is only about 4 or 5 years. People move for careers constantly.
Right, and houses are heavy. You can't just throw them in a backpack and go.
Exactly. Being stuck has a massive, often hidden financial cost. If you own a home, selling it is slow, and it's expensive. It takes months and costs thousands in fees. If you rent, you can usually leave with 30 days' notice. It means if you get a job offer in a new city, moving from Chicago to Austin for a 20% raise, you can just take it immediately. That career mobility is a form of wealth that homeownership restricts.
That's a great point. You could miss out on the biggest income jumps of your career because you're tied down. But what about just the monthly cash flow? Because right now, in a lot of big cities, renting is just cheaper month to month, isn't it?
Significantly cheaper. This is the big disconnect between the buying is cheaper narrative and the reality of 2024. In major hubs, San Francisco, New York, London, Munich, the total monthly cost of owning a home is often 30 to 50% higher than renting a comparable place. You might pay $4,000 a month to own a condo that you could rent for $2,800.
Okay, but this leads directly to the counterargument to that whole throwing money away idea, the invest the difference strategy. I hear this from finance nerds all the time. But does it actually work in the real world?
This is the absolute crux of the financial argument for renting. So let's walk through it. Let's say renting is $1,000 cheaper per month than buying. If you take that $1,000 and you spend it on shoes and nice dinners, then yes, buying wins. You're broke.
Yeah.
But if you take that $1,000 and you automate an investment into the S&P 500 or a diversified index fund, the math changes completely.
Because the stock market grows too.
It grows faster. Historically, the stock market returns about 7 to 10% annually, adjusted for inflation. Real estate, historically, and this really shocks people, returns about 2 to 4% nationally over the long haul.
Wait, really? Only 2 to 4%? That feels incredibly low. I feel like houses are always doubling in value.
We hear about the booms. We hear about the friend who bought in Austin in 2019 and made a fortune. We don't hear about the decades of stagnation in between. Real estate generally keeps pace with inflation, maybe a little better. It's a store of value. But the stock market is an engine of corporate growth. Companies are productive. They create profits. A house just sits there. So a disciplined renter who invests the savings can often end up with a larger net worth than the homeowner after 30 years because their asset, the stocks, is growing so much faster.
So the renter builds wealth in a brokerage account, and the homeowner builds wealth in the walls of their house.
Correct. And that brokerage account is liquid. You can sell your stocks tomorrow if you have a medical emergency. You can't sell your bathroom if you need cash.
I love that image. Honey, we're short on cash. Let's sell the guests back on Zillow. Okay, we've got these two competing frameworks. Now I want to bust some myths, because there are things people believe about mortgages that are just mathematically wrong. Let's talk about amortization. It's a word that makes people's eyes glaze over, but it's so important.
It is the aha moment for most new buyers. People have this simple model in their head. I borrowed money, If I pay $2,000 a month, I am paying off $2,000 of debt. But that is not how a mortgage works. The bank front loads the interest.
Front loads it, you mean they take their cut first?
Exactly. Think of interest as the rent you pay on the money you borrowed. In the beginning, you've borrowed the maximum amount, the full $300,000.
Mm-hmm.
So the rent on that money is the highest it will ever be. In the first 10 to 15 years of a 30-year loan, the vast majority of your payment is just interest. It's profit for the bank. It does not reduce your debt.
Give me a specific example, like year one of a mortgage.
Okay, let's look at the numbers. Let's say in year one, you write checks totaling $21,000 to the bank. It is very common for something like $18,000 of that to go to interest and only $3,000 to actually paying down the house.
Ouch. That hurts physically to hear. So 18 grand just evaporated.
It went to the bank. It didn't build you any equity. So when Uncle Bob says rent is throwing money away, you have to remind him, Uncle Bob, mortgage interest is also throwing money away. You were renting the money from the bank. You don't start making serious dents in the principal, the actual ownership part, until maybe year 15 or 20.
That is just painful. And that connects to the liquidity problem you mentioned earlier. We have this phrase, house rich, cash poor. What does that look like in real life?
It's a very common trap, especially for retirees. You might have a house worth $1 million. On paper, you're a millionaire. But you can't buy groceries with a brick. You can't pay for medical bills with a shingle. Unless you sell the house, which means moving, or you take on new debt like a reverse mortgage. That wealth is trapped. I've seen retirees living on cat food in million-dollar homes because all their money was tied up in equity they couldn't access.
That is a stark, terrifying image. It really highlights that equity isn't the same as cash in the bank. You can't spend your house. Now let's pile on the bad news for a second. We have to talk about the hidden costs. The stuff nobody mentions when they're posting those photos of their new keys on Instagram.
The sticker price of the mortgage is just the entry fee. The list of hidden costs is long, expensive, and it never, ever ends. First up, property taxes.
Yeah.
In the U.S., that's usually 1 to 1.5% of the home's value every single year.
So on a $500,000 house, that's what, $5,000 to $7,500 a year, just for the privilege of owning it.
Exactly. That's hundreds of dollars a month that you pay forever. Even when the mortgage is paid off, the tax man still comes knocking. Then you have insurance, which is getting crazy expensive in places like Florida and California. But the big one, the one that really bankrupts people, is maintenance.
The 1 to 2% rule, right?
Yeah. Yes. You should budget 1 to 2% of your home's value every year for repairs. And I don't mean buying new throw pillows. I mean the unsexy stuff. The roof leaks. The furnace dies in the middle of winter. The water heater explodes on Christmas Eve. If you own a $400,000 home, you should expect to spend $4,000 to $8,000 a year just keeping the thing standing.
And when you're renting, if the water heater explodes...
You make a phone call. Hey, the water heater's broken. Then you go to work. It's the landlord's problem. It's the landlord's $10,000 bill. As a homeowner, you are the landlord.
Okay, there's one more hidden cost. It's a bit more abstract, but I think it's the most important one. The opportunity cost of the down payment. Can you break this down slowly? Because this one really messes with people's heads.
This is huge, and it's invisible, which is why people miss it. So let's go back to that $70,000 down payment you scraped and saved for. If you buy the house, that money is now locked in the house. It's sitting in the drywall. It's not earning you anything. It's just equity.
Right. It's part of the house.
But if you didn't buy the house and you continued to rent, you wouldn't just stick that 70 grand under your mattress. You would invest it. And because of the power of compound interest, your money making money, that $70,000 grows exponentially over time.
How much growth are we talking about?
Let's run the math. $70,000 invested in the market at a pretty standard 8% return over 30 years. You don't add another penny. You just let it sit and compound. Do you know what that grows to?
I'm going to guess maybe triple. 200 grand.
It grows to roughly $750,000. $750,000.
Wow. Okay, that stops me in my tracks.
Yeah.
$750,000.
So when you buy a house, you are effectively saying, I'm willing to give up that potential $750,000 gain in the stock market in exchange for owning this house. That is the opportunity cost. It's the wealth you didn't create because your money was tied up in your home.
Yeah.
You have to factor that lost growth into the real cost of buying.
That really reframes the whole thing. We see the house because it's physical. We don't see the phantom stock portfolio we could have had instead. Okay, we've talked theory. We've talked concepts. I want to see a fight. Let's do a head-to-head showdown. Let's see the numbers side by side. Let's take a mid-size U.S. city scenario.
Let's do it. We'll use a $350,000 home,
Yeah.
a standard starter home in, say, Ohio or parts of Pennsylvania. So, scenario A, you buy it. You put 20% down, that's $70,000. You get a 30-year mortgage at 6.5%. Scenario B, you rent a comparable house right down the street.
Okay, so break down the monthly bleed. What is leaving my bank account every month in both scenarios?
Okay, the buying cost. You add up the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance, and that 1% maintenance budget we talked about. You're looking at roughly $2,500 a month. Let's say $2,484 to be precise.
$2,500 a month. Okay, and for the renter?
The renting cost. For a similar property in that same market, the rent is likely around $1,700 a month.
So the renter is saving almost $800 a month.
Specifically, $784 a month. That's about $900–$400 a year. That is pure cash flow that the renter has that the homeowner does not have.
All right, now let's fast forward 30 years. The homeowner has paid off their mortgage. The renter has been paying rent this whole time. Who wins?
Let's look at the final net worth, the homeowner. The house is appreciated, we'll be generous and say 3% a year. It's now worth about $840,000, and it's paid off. So the homeowner's net worth is $840,000. Solid.
Solid. Okay, what about the renter?
The renter. They took that initial $70,000 down payment and invested it. They also take that $784 monthly savings and invested it every single month for 30 years at that same 8% market return, the renter's portfolio value, approximately $1.1 million.
Hold on, wait a minute. The renter wins by like $250,000.
Strictly on the numbers, in this very plausible scenario, yes, the renter comes out ahead.
I'm looking at these numbers and my gut is screaming, no. You're telling me I throw away $1,700 a month on rent for 30 years. Money that is gone forever, and I end up richer than the guy who owns the house. That sounds like voodoo math. Most people I know who rent aren't millionaires. Explain that discrepancy.
That is the massive blinking red light BUT, the crucial caveat. This math relies entirely on behavioral psychology. This only works if the renter is disciplined and actually invests the difference.
Right.
If the renter takes that extra $784 a month and buys a nicer car or goes on more vacations or just lets it get absorbed into lifestyle creep, they lose. And they lose badly.
Because at the end of 30 years, the homeowner has a paid-off house no matter what. It's that forced savings we talked about. The undisciplined renter has zero assets and a closet full of shoes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So buying wins for the undisciplined saver because it forces you to build wealth.
Right.
Renting wins for the disciplined investor because the math of the stock market usually beats the math of real estate. You have to be brutally honest about which person you are.
That is such a powerful distinction. It's not just about running the numbers on the market. It's about looking in the mirror. Who are you? Can you actually trust yourself to auto-deposit that savings every single month without fail? I want to pivot now to the cultural side of this because we Americans are like weirdly obsessed with owning a home. It's in our DNA. But you've looked at the European data. It's completely different over there.
It's a completely different world. In the U.S., homeownership is basically a religion. It was pushed by post-WWII policy, suburbanization, marketing. We literally invented the 30-year fixed mortgage to encourage it. But then you look at a country like Germany or the Netherlands or Switzerland. In Switzerland, the majority of people rent. In Germany, it's about half the population.
Why? Do they just hate equity? Are they bad with money? What's going on?
No, the system is just designed differently. In those countries, renting is stable. They have incredibly strong tenant protections. In Germany, for example, rental contracts are often indefinite. You can live in a rental property for 20 or 30 years.
So the landlord can't just kick you out because they feel like selling the place.
It is extremely difficult to evict a tenant in Germany. The landlord needs a very specific, legally valid reason. And get this, in Germany, when you rent an apartment, it often doesn't come with a kitchen.
Wait, what? No kitchen?
No kitchen. You bring your own, you buy the cabinets, the sink, the stove, you install them. And when you move in 10 years, you take your kitchen with you.
That sounds completely insane to an American. Why would you ever do that?
Because it's considered your home. You customize it. You paint the walls. You install your dream kitchen. You get the feeling of ownership, the stability, the customization without having a mortgage. The instability that Americans are so afraid of, the landlord jacking up the rent or evicting you, that's a policy choice we made. It's not a law of nature.
That is fascinating. So in the U.S., renting feels unstable because our laws make it unstable with these 12-month leases. In Europe, renting can provide the very stability that Americans think only comes from owning a deed.
Precisely. And because of that stability, there's no social schedule. You're not seen as a failure if you rent in Berlin at age 40. You're just living your life.
Which brings us to the whole generational warfare aspect of this, because if I'm a millennial or Gen Z listener, I'm probably screaming at my phone right now saying, I would love to buy, but I literally can't. The numbers don't work.
And you have every right to be angry. The bridge has been pulled up, and we have to be honest about that. When the baby boomers were buying their first homes in the 1980s, a house cost about 3 to 4 times their annual income.
3 to 4 times, okay?
Today, in major cities, a house costs 8 to 12 times the median income. The multiple is tripled.
That is a staggering gap. That's not a skip your morning coffee problem. That's a structural impossibility.
It is. The down payment is the biggest barrier. Saving 20% on a $500,000 home is $100,000. How long does it take to save $100,000 when you're also paying high rent and student loans? For many, it's a decade.
And I assume the boomers giving the advice the Uncle Bobs of the world, they don't realize this has changed.
They often don't. They're giving advice based on the economy of 1985. They say things like, just buy a starter home, fix it up. Well, today, the starter home is $450,000 and needs a new foundation. The math has fundamentally broken for new entrants to the market. Yes, there are low down payment options, but they come with PMI private mortgage insurance, which is just another monthly fee that burns cash.
Plus, there's the stigma. In the US, if you're 40 and you're renting, people look at you funny like, oh, what went wrong?
That shame is so toxic. I've seen people make terrible financial decisions, buying a house they can't afford with a commute they hate, just to avoid the shame of renting. We need to kill that stigma. As we just proved with the math, renting can be a brilliant strategic wealth-building choice. You are not throwing money away. You are buying flexibility and potentially higher investment returns.
Okay, let's try to turn all this theory into something actionable. Let's give the listeners a cheat sheet, a decision framework. When should you absolutely buy and when should you absolutely rent?
Okay, let's boil it down to some hard rules. You should probably buy if 1. You plan to stay put for at least 7 to 10 years. It takes on just to break even on all the transaction costs, the agent fees, closing costs, taxes. If you sell in year 3, you will almost certainly lose money, even if the market went up.
7 years, that's a long time.
It is. 2. You're in a market where the price-to-rent ratio is under 15. This is a nerdy stat, but you can find it online. If the house price is low compared to the annual rent, buying makes more sense. 3. You really value control and customization. You want to knock down walls. You want to garden more than you value flexibility. And 4, you are a forced saver. Be honest with yourself. If you don't have that mortgage payment, will you just spend the money on Amazon? If the answer is yes, then maybe you should buy a house.
Okay, and the flip side. When should I definitely rent?
You should probably rent if 1. Your timeline is under 5 years. If you might move for work or get married or change lifestyles, do not buy a house. You'll lose a fortune on transaction costs. 2. You live in a megacity, New York, San Francisco, London, Toronto. The price-to-rent ratios there are often over 20, even 25. Renting is almost always mathematically superior in those places because home prices are so detached from reality. 3. You are a disciplined investor who will actually truly automate the process of investing the savings. And 4. Your life is in flux. If you're in your early 20s, buying a house is like strapping a heavy anchor to your foot right when you need to be able to run and explore opportunities.
I love that anchor analogy. I see so many young people buy a condo, then they get a dream job offer in another state and they can't take it because they can't sell the condo or they're underwater on the loan.
Exactly. Flexibility has a dollar value. Don't discount it. Being able to say yes to a great opportunity is worth a lot of money.
Quickly, before we wrap up, what about investment properties? Becoming a landlord. Is that the golden ticket? Everyone on TikTok is talking about passive income.
It is not passive income. It is a part-time job that you don't get to clock out of. You are dealing with toilets, tenants, and termites at all hours. You can build wealth, sure, but you have concentration risk. All your money is tied up in one building in one neighborhood. If that neighborhood goes downhill, you're wiped out. A broad index fund is diversified across the entire global economy. For most people, the index fund is safer, easier, and way more liquid.
All right, let's look to the future. What structural shifts are changing this game right now? Are we just doomed to high prices forever?
Remote work is the big wild card. It's what we call geographic arbitrage. If you can earn a New York City salary but live in Ohio or even Portugal, buying suddenly becomes very viable again. You can buy a palace in a cheaper market for the cost of a closet in a big city. It decouples your income from your housing cost, which is a game changer.
That's the dream. And what about demographics?
Well, we have a clash. Millennials are at their peak home buying age right now, which is keeping demand high.
Yeah.
But long term, in Europe and Japan, you have aging populations that are starting to reduce demand. Eventually, demographics might actually cool the housing market down as boomers start to sell off their homes, but we aren't there yet in the U.S. We still have a major housing shortage.
So as we close this out, what is the final thought? If I'm listening to this and I'm still feeling conflicted, what's the one thing I should take away from all this?
My final thought is this: ignore the noise. Ignore the slogans. Rent is dead money is a marketing slogan, not a math equation. Run your numbers for your zip code. And remember that wealth isn't just about equity. Liquidity is wealth. Flexibility is wealth. Time is wealth.
And I just emphasize that renting is not a failure. It can be a strategic choice that buys you freedom and, ironically, might even make you richer if you're disciplined about investing. Don't let the pressure of the American dream force you into a nightmare mortgage.
And here's a final provocative thought to leave you with. This decision isn't just financial. It's about designing the life you want. A 30-year mortgage dictates so much of your life. It dictates where you sleep, how much you can travel, what jobs you feel you can take. Don't let the mortgage be the boss of you. Make sure the house serves your life goals, not the other way around. Conscious choice is the only real win here.
Boom. Conscious choice. I love that. And remember, these decisions are reversible. If you buy and you hate it, you can sell. It might cost you, but it's not a life sentence. If you rent and want to buy later, you can. It's not the end of the world. Just getting informed reduces so much of the fear.
Exactly.
Go check your price to rent ratios, everyone. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.